Don't let a DUI charge ruin your life. Get a professional and confidential evaluation from our experienced team at True Heights Treatment. Our evaluations are accepted by the majority of courts in the state of Illinois and provide a comprehensive assessment of your substance use patterns and potential treatment needs. Get the help you need today and start your path to a brighter future. Contact us now to schedule your evaluation at 708-248-7039 or at thtdui.com.
The George Brassey podcast is made possible with funding provided from Brassey Global Strategies, LLC, a leading political consulting, public policy, government affairs, and research firm. Are you interested in running for elected office? Need advice? Call or email George, 708-769-5015. Brassey Global Strategies 1 at gmail.com.
So glad to welcome our next guest to the podcast, Oren Levin Waldman. Oren, thanks for coming on the.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Oren, tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what some of your interests are.
I am a labor economist. I do research on labor markets. I'm a former college professor. I guess I'm a consultant. My interests are labor markets, wage policy, economic policy, political economy, some political theory, and some constitutional law.
Oren, tell the audience a little bit about how the labor market has changed, in your opinion, since the pandemic began last year.
Well, I think that it's changed in a couple of ways. One, we've seen that the consequences of closure have not been borne equally by different groups of people in the labor market. So what you have are those who have been forced to go to work at a physical site have been more exposed and more at risk of getting COVID. Those who have been fortunate to work remotely, members of what we might call the elite, they have basically suffered no real loss in their income, so they are doing quite well at the moment. The other thing is, I think what we're seeing, hopefully we're seeing, is maybe a redefinition of the meaning of work. So it may be that the days of having to come into an office to do your work may be over, possibly. We may be moving in a direction where more people will want to do work remotely instead of having to spend 4 hours commuting a day. So we have yet to see how that shakes out.
The work from home revolution has really changed things, especially for my business. I'm a mental health counselor, and it has really changed things. It's so many people are doing it now. It's unbelievable. Do you think that will have an impact on commercial office space?
That's the theory. I mean, a lot of businesses are questioning why they're spending so much money in rent when they could actually allow their workforce to work from home, and they can save a lot of money. They have found that their workers are just as productive when they're working from home, and they could be ahead of the game financially if they didn't have to pay huge amounts of money in rent, especially in places like New York City.
Mm-hmm. Oren, what are your thoughts about one area of interest you have is wage policy. So tell the audience a little bit about what that is and what are your thoughts on $15 minimum?
Wage policy is this idea that wages have to go up on a routine basis for to maintain a middle class. Traditionally labor unions basically serve to bolster the wages of the middle class. They've been in decline for several decades now. A minimum wage is also part of that wage policy. When the minimum wage actually increased, the wages of everybody also increased. It's not just the case that only those at the lowest end of the labor market saw increases in their wages, but actually, truthfully, the wages of a swath of the labor market also increased as well. Um, Part of the reason why employers don't want you to be supportive of it, they're critical of the minimum wage because they know that they will have to give raises to people in wage ranges above those earning the statutory minimum wage. So that's their concern. But it has also served to maintain a middle class. So there are a couple ways to do this. You could have a minimum wage. I don't know if going from the current $7.25 to $15 an hour in one shot is necessarily the smartest thing to do because that is a shock to most employers. But there has to be some mechanism for increasing the minimum wage and then indexing it to either the inflation rate or some kind of productivity measure in order for it to keep up. I think that's the idea of a 15-hour minimum wage is probably not going to be destructive to the economy, as critics claim. Um, where there have been studies out there which suggest that when you're paying workers low wages, we the taxpayers are subsidizing those low wages. In fact, we're subsidizing the profits of their employers to the tune of $152.8 billion a year in social supports. And the thinking is that at $15 an hour minimum wage, you could actually begin to see a reduction in the need for those kinds of supports.
You mentioned that employers are really critical of the minimum wage, and now it seems like there's a kind of a climate in our country where there's a lot of people that are being not employed. They're taking unemployment, and there's a lot of shame going on about that. You recently wrote an article. Can you talk a little bit about that article? About employers not being able to hire people because of the unemployment benefits?
The argument's been out there, and it's certainly something it's a drum that's being beaten on Fox News, and it's being equally as much in the Wall Street Journal. I think it's a little more complicated than that. Truthfully, there have been so many restrictions because of COVID that many of these employers, especially those who employ low-wage workers, can only operate at 30% capacity at the moment. So giving the limit to capacity doesn't matter what the wages are. You're not going to call workers back if you can't operate at full capacity. That's point number one. Two, if workers don't have places to send their children, if schools are still operating remotely and they're not having in-person learning, then workers have no place to have their kids during the day. So they're really not in a position to go back to work. It probably is the case at the lowest rung of the wage structure that you will see employees say, okay, maybe I can get more from not working than from working. But I don't think it's the case for people as you move up the ladder. The problem, I think, is, there are a couple ways to solve this problem. One, you could, if you're really concerned about it, have states kind of give workers the difference between the wages from going back to work and what they would get with these enhanced unemployment benefits. That's one possibility. The other possibility is to tell employers to raise their wages to attract people back to the labor market. Those are some things that you can do. The other thing that you kind of really need to do is overhaul the unemployment insurance system. It's not really compensating people at a reasonable rate. You wouldn't even need these enhanced benefits if, in fact, you were to give workers, say, a replacement wage of 60 to 75% or 80% of their wages, which is the case in any number of European countries.
Do you feel like there's going to be a trend towards automation, and what impact will that have on the labor?
I people talk about trends in automation. They say that as you increase wages, you're going to see more of a move towards technology. And I actually did write an article about that several years ago about the march to technology could make a universal basic income inevitable. So, it's possible that, as you increase wages, employers say, look, it's more cost efficient to replace workers with technology. So we'll hire fewer workers. Ultimately, you might find that the state has to give workers a universal basic income, everybody this universal basic income, which in some ways could be positive because then it would enable the typical Walmart worker to say, okay, I'm working because I want to work. Now the Walmart is forced to raise the wages to attract people back in the labor market because what they're paying is going to be over and above this universal basic income. However, it would also be a very costly proposition. I don't see it happening anytime soon with the composition of government as it is right now. Even if you were to replace all your social programs, I'm talking about Social Security, all the public supports with a universal basic income, which is the only way you could really make it work, it would still add probably several $1 trillion to the budget.
You, on your website, you talk about how the presidential election of 2016 showed the power of labor markets. Can you go into that? And do you also feel like 2020 showed that as well?
I think 2020 was a classic case of we don't like Trump, so let's get him out of here. And I don't think people really paid too much attention to the issues. And I'm certainly no defender of Trump. But I think what you saw in 2016 is interesting. I think a lot of pundits wanted to make the case that Trump was elected on racism, the work that he appealed to racism of the workforce of a number of voters out there. Many of these voters actually voted for Barack Obama not once but twice. So what I think is happening in 2016 is he appealed to workers who had been displaced from manufacturing jobs. And if you divide the states into blue states and red states, which we do for electoral purposes, and we divide it based on what we think is ideological difference, but you actually look at the respective labor markets of red states and blue states, what you'll find is there are several key differences. One, inequality is much greater in blue states than it is in red states. Red states has more of a manufacturing base than do blue states. Red states have less wage dispersion. You have more skilled blue collar workers in red states. Blue states, you have more work, a greater divide between those at the very top of the educational ladder, people with advanced degrees, and people who have no skills at all in blue states. And you also have in red states more mining activity. So if you have a candidate like Hillary Clinton, who went to a number of states and said, well, especially among miners, that I'm going to eliminate your jobs. It's not a great way to attract voters in those states. And I was looking specifically at why Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan flipped from blue to red in 2016. And what I think I discovered was that because the manufacturing base was strong in those states, people probably had a sense that they were being displaced in the economy. And there was a candidate who really was not tapping into that anxiety. And for some reason, Trump tapped into it, didn't really deliver on it, but he did tap into it. That the sense that these workers had dispossessed. And I think that's what happened in 2016. I think in 2020, I think is interesting because if I'm looking at some of the data from 2019, from 2016 to 2019, a lot of the claims that were made, okay, we have systemic racism and this and that. I think what you also had is among Black workers and Latino workers, they actually saw wage gains between 2016 and 2019. White workers actually saw wage losses. So I think that actually certain groups made gains during that period, other groups may have lost. But I think what really happened in 2020 was it was really an anti-Trump vote.
So interesting. What are your thoughts on the quote unquote gig economy? Because it seems like that is an area of the economy that is going to continue to grow going forward.
I think that as employers realize that they can get as much from workers from contract work and without having to pay the full benefits to their workers. I mean, in other words, they're just paying wages and they're not paying full compensation packages, which include benefits. Then I think that we're going to see more of that in the future. The argument really should be made that if you want workers to be successful, you do have to sever health insurance from employment. It really cannot be part of an employment package. Either you're going to provide it by, you're going to have a government program where you have universal health care, or you basically will have workers buying their own insurance, whether employers give them a voucher to purchase insurance in the market themselves, whatever, however you do it, but you cannot have it connected to an employment contract. I think once we get to that point, then people in the gig economy could do extremely well.
Oren, tell the audience a little bit about your practice, your business, and what type of services you can offer communities, consultants, candidates, etc.
Well, I'm working through politicalvip.com. What I do is I do custom demographic studies for people if they are interested in knowing how labor markets or economies in a particular district have changed over time, and in the hopes that that may help them frame the issues in a way that can reach voters. I don't think traditional polling gets at that. I think you need to have an understanding of the issues and the nature of changes in the economy to be able to frame polling questions properly. So that's pretty much what I can do. I can offer to frame issues. I can offer an understanding of economic policy, but more specifically, I can do custom-made studies of labor markets and the general demographics and changes in those demographics.
Oren, what are 2 books you would recommend to the audience that have been influential and important to you as a person?
I read so many books, it's hard to say which ones have been influential, but I think, and they go back many years, probably to my student days, but certainly, John Locke's Second Treaty was certainly influential for me, and as well as Lewis Hart's Liberal Tradition in America. That was also very influential in my life. Not that I always agree with everything they had to say, but they certainly influenced my thinking.
Oren, if somebody wanted to work with you or your firm, how would they get a hold of you and find you on the internet?
I think they can contact me through my website. They can book an appointment through politicalvip.com. I'm listed among the consultants there.
Great. Well, Oren, thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
Thank you.
Take care.
Help George stay on the Chicago Heights City Council. Go and donate today at tinyurl.com/AldermanGeorge 2023.
Begin to transform your life and work towards inner peace with expert psychotherapy. At True Heights Treatment, our experienced therapists provide personalized, compassionate care to help you overcome life's challenges and reach your goals. Whether you're struggling with depression, anxiety, relationship issues, or other mental health concerns, our team is here to support you. With a warm and welcoming in-person and virtual office atmosphere and a commitment to person-centered and evidence-based treatments, we are dedicated to helping you address your life's challenges. Contact us now to schedule your first session at 708-248-7039 or online at trueheightstx.com. Book your appointment today and start your journey towards a happier, healthier life.
Need more George? Like his pages on Facebook. Friends of George Brassey PAC, Fifth Ward Business Alliance, Chicago Heights Bicycle and Pedestrian Resource Center, and the George Brassey Podcast.